Hi, I'm Zachary and welcome back to Mystery Sonata channel. Today we're talking about changing a gut string on a Baroque violin. Almost all 18th century violins were modernized in the 19th and 20th centuries. The angle of the neck was sharpened so that there would be more downward pressure on the bridge, giving a more penetrating focus to the sound that's appropriate for our rather large concert halls today. This instrument is an original 17th century Baroque violin, but it also was modernized, and so it had to be retrofitted as a Baroque instrument. And that's a complicated procedure because the instruments were not standardized in their setup during the 18th century, for example. But there are some common characteristics that will help an instrument to achieve more of the sound that we believe is appropriate for Baroque music. One of the things that we do is we reduce mass on the instrument. So instead of having a thick, long, heavy ebony fingerboard, this one is a hybrid. The ebony is on the top. And then you can see there's a beautifully matching tailpiece, which is also lightweight. The neck is thicker, and in this case, rather than replace the entire neck, there was simply a wedge added. And that lessens the amount of tension on the instrument. Some of the smaller but important aspects of the Baroque violin, the bridge. It's a different design, and there were so many in that century, in the 18th century, for example, and before and after. Also, the tail wire, in this case, is a tail gut. There are also synthetic guts, like nylon or Nile gut. And the advantage of those is that they don't stretch as much, so they're more stable. Some believe that the real gut has a better sound and more complex overtones, even in the tail wire or the tail gut. Typically, a Baroque violin has the top 2 or 3 strings made from pure gut. That is the intestinal lining of sheep or ram or ox. And there are many producers of these strings in the United States as well as Europe and even beyond. Some players like to have 2 wound gut, that is to say metal wound around a gut core, and then 2 pure gut on the top 2 strings. Other people like to have 3 pure gut strings with just 1, the G string, the lowest string, as the wound. And you can see here that I'm using Passione wound gut strings made by the old company Perastro. Then I have a pure gut A, and I'm going to add a pure gut E. I like the balance of 2 and 2, where the bass strings are the wound string and the soprano and alto strings, the E and the A strings, are the pure gut strings. I find the instrument's very stable, it stays in tune more. I've chosen Perastro. It's an old string company, and they make a wide variety of string types. And their Corda line, which is the pure gut without winding, arrives in the package without a ball at the end, without winding. And so there's a little bit of work that needs to be done. Basically, you need to tie a knot at one end so that the string doesn't pull through the hole in the tailpiece. Now, if you're using a modern tailpiece, you need to make that knot rather large because modern tailpieces tend to have a larger space. The Baroque tailpieces that most luthiers are making today for Baroque violins have a small hole that's really just large enough for the string to pass through. Some people are very particular about the knot that they tie, and you can go online and read about all kinds of interesting fishing knots and pick the one that's your favorite. It's kind of like tying a tie. Everybody has his or her own preference. For me, the important thing is that you don't bend the rest of the string. That is, every time you bend a sharp angle on the string and sort of break its consistency, you're losing the integrity of the string and its tone. So you want to make sure you stay within a couple of inches. If you go beyond that, you won't have enough string left. And you basically just want to tie a knot that's large enough that at a high tension it won't pass through the whole of the tailpiece. So I'm going to go with the simplest, and notice how I just sort of pull and make sure I have enough after length that I can tie a couple more knots, because one will not be enough for me. Even with the Baroque tailpiece, I like 2 or 3 just to be sure. So there I go. I've got the knot. I have the after length. I'm just going to pass that around again. You can do a square knot. You can do whatever you like. The main thing is that it's large enough for your purposes, for your tailpiece. I'm going to do one more. Pass around, and I'm just careful that in this extra string that I'm not creasing it. But I'm keeping anything like that in the part of the string that will be lower than the bridge, the part of the string that I don't play with the bow. Okay, now this is going to be fine. If you like, you can always take the long part and pass through the knot that you've created. And there's an easy way to expand your knot. In fact, some people like to make sure that as the string tightens, and it's very flexible, that the knot doesn't travel, and this end piece of gut can be burned at the end just for a second, which expands the string. And therefore, if the knot does get stretched and pulled down towards the end of the string, there's even more resistance. So the gut strings can break very easily. The first thing that I do is I take a number 2, or even better, a number 1 pencil, soft lead, and I lubricate the sharp edges. In this case, there's one here. And then on the bridge, you'll notice that I have little marks on the bridge. A tiny bit of powdered graphite would be fine as well, but a little messier. And then I make sure that I also get the nut. Now, when putting a gut E string on a modern tailpiece, say a modern violin, maybe I like the sound of that instrument and I tune it down a half step and I use it for some Baroque music. But I find that the thin gauged E string is very easy to break with the modern tailpiece because of the sharp edge. In that case, I find another string. You'll notice that viola A strings and violin E strings come with a little plastic tube that passes over the bridge. What I do is I remove that tube from another string, I put it on the gut string, but I put it at the very end so that it's here. Not on the bridge, but here. So on the modern tailpiece, not on this Baroque violin, I feel that I need that little tube as the string passes through the tailpiece over the sharp edge. It's a nice trick. It makes the string last longer. Another trick is to not use rosin that has metal particles, like the gold flakes or the silver flakes. Those are perfectly fine for your synthetic strings, your Eva Perazzi, your dominant. Absolutely fine for your steel core strings like helicore, but you don't want to use an abrasive rosin like that with a pure gut string, as it can literally saw through the string in the place where you bow. Now we'll put on the string. I take the end that's going into the peg and I like to make a little break, a 90-degree angle. That's going to pass into the tailpiece. There's the knot. just like a regular violin or a modern violin, I want to go into the peg. But what I like to do here is I like to push through a little bit further so that there's some extra string right there, maybe a centimeter or even an inch, so that I've got some wiggle room if I need to adjust the string. That may be a little much. Now I'm going to turn the peg once and wind to the left of that extra string. Notice I'm to the left of the hole in the peg. Now I'm going to cross over to the right side and I'm going to give a couple more turns. And then at this point, I want to start getting the string over to the right wall of the peg box. That way, those extra windings of string that touch the peg box will offer some resistance and keep the peg from pulling out or from going loose when you don't want it to. Now I always go back and I make sure that the string didn't get caught in the bridge. I put it over the lubricated groove. Remember, we lubricated it with pencil. I go back and make sure that it's on the nut. Almost. And at this point I like to go rather slowly. I will go in and lift the string. Notice I just put the hand on the fingerboard and the other one on the tailpiece. And I just lift a little bit off the bridge so that I'm equalizing the tension. Of course, there's a higher tension on this side of the bridge than on the plain side of the bridge. But as I tune, that tension compounds behind the bridge. So I'll tune up a little more, and I like to have resistance here, counter pressure. So I can pluck with the thumb and just give a little bit of light counter pressure so that the peg stays in. And at this point, I'm getting closer and closer. I pinch, and I just lift a tiny bit. Ah, very good. Okay? At this point, you'll notice that the end of the string is no longer touching the top of the instrument because the string has already stretched and the knot has moved. It is large enough. It hasn't pulled through. And at this point, I do something rather particular. I stop at the interval of a perfect fourth. And I like to play the string in a little bit. Just a few notes. So now, after tuning the string slowly, playing it along the way, bringing it up to a fourth instead of a fifth, and then a little bit more, and then finally, I'm at the fifth, and I'm playing it in a little bit. Starting to sound okay. But you'll notice before I retune that the peg placement is horizontal. And I find that for my hand and for the idiosyncratic manner in which I tune, that I like to have the pegs vertical or nearly vertical. And that's why I asked you to have some extra string length. The reason for the extra string length is so that I can get this peg where I want it to be. Now, I should warn you that this string is going to stretch for another half an hour. So I might play it for about a half an hour before I try to get the peg in the right place. Now let's say that I've played for half an hour and it's time to get that peg in a better place, because with the Baroque violin there aren't fine tuners. A gut string would break on a fine tuner. So we really want the pegs to be in the proper place. So what I do is I find that extra string length. There it is. And I'm going to tune down, and I'm going to pull the string 2 or 3 millimeters, either one direction or the other direction. Doesn't matter, you'll find what's right immediately, because if it's not perfect right now, you'll know exactly what you need to do. And I'm going to tune again to the left of the string, to the right of the string, and onto the peg box wall, just like before. I'll tune up almost, then again I lift. There we are at the perfect fourth, and again I pinch and lift just a little bit. So the procedure is a little bit more time intensive than changing a string on a modern violin, but it's worth it if you play the Baroque violin. Notice now that the E string peg is almost vertical, which is in the right placement for my hand. Now the string is applied and it's stretching and I can begin to practice. You might notice that the A string is starting to fray in some places. I never pull on those hairs of the string. The string will unravel and fall apart. Generally speaking, I remove the string and I apply cocoa butter, 100% pure, fragrance-free cocoa butter. You can buy it in a stick or in a tub. And I apply a little bit on the string and let it sit for a day or for an hour, and then I wipe it dry with a washcloth, a dry washcloth, and put the string back on. And the moisture that goes into the string helps to increase the life of the string. If it's before a concert and the fraying is getting in the way, it's making noise and it's getting in the way of my fingering, then I will take nail clippers and just clip the string, but I will never pull on the frayed part of the string. And now I'm ready to practice. I hope that you'll subscribe to Mystery Sonata channel and give us a thumbs up if you like the videos. Have a great day.